I'll start with some background about myself and how my husband Jack and I met. I, 27F, was diagnosed with PCOS and endometriosis when I was 18. The doctors told me that getting pregnant would be extremely difficult, if not impossible. It was hard to accept at first, but over time I learned to live with it. I focused on my career and building my life, even though my own parents constantly worried about who would marry me with this condition. Jack, 29M, and I met through mutual friends at a work conference 5 years ago. He was charming, intelligent, and most importantly, he made me laugh. We hit it off immediately and started dating soon after. On our third date, I decided to be upfront about my condition. I remember that night clearly. We were having dinner at a small Italian restaurant, and I was terribly nervous about telling him. But Jack surprised me with his reaction. He held my hand across the table and told me that having biological children wasn't a deal-breaker for him. He said he was more interested in finding the right partner than in having biological children. We dated for 3 years before getting married. During our dating period, we discussed our future extensively. Jack suggested that we could always adopt or try other options if we wanted children later. His acceptance and understanding made me fall even more in love with him. We got engaged after 2 years of dating, and that's when I first met his family properly. His mother Sandra seemed nice at first, but there were small red flags that I ignored. She would make comments about how important family was and how she couldn't wait to have grandchildren. During our engagement, she constantly talked about how cute Jack was as a baby and how she hoped our children would look just like him. I should have addressed it then, but I was so focused on the wedding preparations that I let it slide. Our wedding was beautiful, though Sandra did try to take over the planning several times. She insisted on inviting distant relatives I had never met, saying they all needed to be there to welcome the future mother of her grandchildren. Again, I chose to ignore these comments for the sake of peace. The first year of our marriage was wonderful. We bought a small house, adopted 2 cats, and were just enjoying being together. Sandra would visit every few weeks, and each time she'd make subtle comments about the empty bedrooms in our house and how they would make perfect nurseries. Things started getting really tense about 6 months ago. Sandra's best friend became a grandmother, and suddenly the pressure on us intensified. She started sending us links to fertility clinics and articles about miracle pregnancies. Every time we met her, she had a new story about someone who overcame fertility issues. At first, we just deflected, saying we weren't ready for children yet. But things came to a head last month. Sandra invited us for a family dinner, something she does monthly. Everything was normal until after dinner when she cornered me in the kitchen while I was helping her with the dishes. She started asking very personal questions about why we weren't trying for children yet. She wanted to know if we were using protection, if we had gotten fertility tests done, and if I was taking any supplements. I tried to change the subject several times, but she wouldn't let it go. Finally, feeling cornered and uncomfortable, I told her about my condition. Her reaction was explosive. She dropped the plate she was holding, and it shattered on the floor. She started screaming about how I had deceived her son and ruined his life. She called me selfish and manipulative, saying I should have told them about my condition before the wedding. When Jack heard the commotion and came into the kitchen, Sandra turned on him. She was crying and telling him how I had trapped him, how I had stolen his chance to be a father. Jack tried to explain that he had known about my condition all along, but this just made her more furious. She accused me of brainwashing him and said he was too young to understand the importance of having children when he made that decision. Jack's father Tom, who had always been quiet and pleasant, came in and tried to calm the situation. But when Sandra told him about my condition, his face changed too. He looked at me like I had committed some horrible crime. He started talking about how important it was to carry on the family name and how Jack was their only child. The situation got even worse when Sandra brought up Jack's cousin Mark, who had recently divorced his wife because she didn't want children. She said that at least Mark's ex-wife had been honest about not wanting children, while I had trapped Jack by hiding my defect, her exact word. Jack was furious at this point. He told his parents that they were being ridiculous and that he had made his choice with full knowledge of everything. He said he loved me and that having biological children was not more important than our relationship. Sandra then said something that really hurt. She said that Jack would grow to resent me, that one day he would wake up and realize I had robbed him of the chance to be a father, and by then it would be too late. We left immediately after that, with Sandra crying dramatically and Tom standing there shaking his head disapprovingly. Since then, Sandra has been on a campaign to save her son from me. She's been calling our relatives, telling them her version of events where I'm the manipulative woman who trapped her son by hiding my infertility. She's even reached out to Jack's ex-girlfriend from college, Amy, telling her that Jack made a mistake in marrying me and that they should reconnect. Jack has been incredibly supportive through all of this, but I can see how much it's affecting him. He's becoming stressed and distant, especially when his phone rings multiple times a day with calls from his mother. He started letting most calls go to voicemail. Tom has also been calling him regularly, trying to convince him to think about his future. I know I did nothing wrong. I was honest with Jack from the beginning, and we made our decision together. But I can't help feeling terrible about causing this rift between Jack and his parents. They were always a close family, and now that relationship is strained because of me. Jack keeps telling me it's not my fault, but watching him lose his relationship with his parents is breaking my heart. Update 1: The situation with Sandra has gotten much worse than I could have imagined. What started as phone calls and family drama has now escalated into something that's affecting both our personal and professional lives. Last Wednesday, I was at work when I got a call from Lisa, one of Jack's co-workers who I'm friendly with. She called to warn me that Sandra has shown up at Jack's office with his ex-girlfriend Amy. I felt my stomach drop when Lisa described how Sandra was walking around the office, introducing Amy to everyone as Jack's future wife and telling people that Jack and I were getting divorced. According to Lisa, Sandra had dressed Amy up like she was going to a business meeting and was telling everyone that Amy was a successful pediatrician. She's actually a high school teacher who could give Jack the family he deserved. She even had photos of Jack and Amy from college that she was showing around the office. Lisa said most people were uncomfortable and trying to avoid them, but Sandra was persistent, even trying to get into Jack's office to surprise him. Thankfully, Jack was in an important client meeting offsite when this happened. The office receptionist, who knew about our situation from previous incidents of Sandra calling the office, refused to tell Sandra where Jack was. She'd also asked them to leave when they had been waiting for over an hour, saying it was against company policy to have unauthorized visitors loitering in the office. When Jack found out about this later that day, he was furious. He immediately called Amy to find out what was going on. It turns out that Sandra had been in contact with Amy for weeks, feeding her a completely false narrative. She told Amy that Jack was miserable in our marriage, that I had forced him to cut contact with his family, and that he had confided in Sandra about wanting to reconnect with Amy. Amy was mortified when Jack told her the truth. She broke down crying and apologized profusely, saying she had no idea about the reality of the situation. She explained that Sandra had shown her old emails from Jack from their college days, and convinced her that Jack still had feelings for her. Amy admitted that she had been vulnerable to Sandra's manipulation because she had recently gone through a bad breakup, and the idea that her college sweetheart still cared about her had been comforting. The workplace incident caused significant problems for Jack. People started whispering behind his back, and some of his colleagues began treating him differently. One of his team members even asked him directly if he was planning to leave me for his ex. Jack had to schedule a meeting with HR to explain the situation and ensure that Sandra would not be allowed into the building again. But the workplace drama wasn't even the worst part. Yesterday, we discovered that Sandra had been spreading vicious lies about me in our community. She told people at her church group that I had been lying about my condition and was secretly taking birth control pills because I didn't want to ruin my figure with pregnancy. She claimed to have found birth control pills in our bathroom during her last visit, which is completely false as I've never needed them due to my medical condition. These rumors have spread through our social circle, and now some of our friends are looking at me differently. One of my close friends, Rachel, admitted that Sandra had called her crying, saying she was worried about her son's happiness and asking Rachel to talk some sense into me about stopping the birth control. Rachel didn't believe Sandra, but she thought I should know what was being said. Jack finally reached his breaking point when he learned that Sandra had been telling people that I had previous pregnancies that I had terminated before meeting him, and that's what had caused my infertility. This lie was particularly cruel because she knew about my medical history. I had shown her my medical records when she first started accusing me of lying about my condition. When Jack confronted his mother about these lies, she broke down crying, something she seems to do a lot, and said she was just trying to save him from a lifetime of regret. She revealed that she had already consulted a divorce lawyer on Jack's behalf and had scheduled an appointment for next week. She had even paid a retainer fee using money from their family emergency fund. Jack told her that if she didn't stop spreading lies about me and interfering in our marriage, he would cut all contact with her. Sandra's response was to accuse me of brainwashing her son against his own mother. She said that the son she raised would never speak to his mother this way, so clearly, I must be manipulating him. Tom, Jack's father, called later that evening to tell Jack that he was being ungrateful and disrespectful to his mother. He said that Sandra was crying herself sick every night because she was worried about Jack's future. When Jack tried to explain how Sandra's behavior was affecting us, Tom dismissed it as a mother's concern and said we were overreacting. Jack and I are at a loss about what to do. He's considering taking legal action if Sandra doesn't stop spreading lies about me, but we're worried that might just make things worse. His work situation is becoming uncomfortable, and we're both stressed about what new drama Sandra might create next. Jack is standing firm in his support of me, but I can see how much this whole situation is wearing him down. We're thinking about moving to a different city where Jack's company has another office, but it feels unfair that we might have to uproot our lives because of Sandra's behavior. For now, we're documenting everything she does in case we need it for legal purposes later. I never imagined my mother-in-law's obsession with grandchildren would turn into something this ugly. Update 2: A lot has happened since my last update, and we finally discovered the real reason behind Sandra's extreme behavior. Everything started unraveling last week when Jack's cousin Emma reached out to me privately through Facebook. Emma and I had only met a few times at family gatherings, and she usually kept to herself. She messaged me saying she needed to tell me something important about Sandra, but she wanted to meet in person. We met at a coffee shop far from where Sandra lives, as Emma was worried about being seen. What Emma revealed completely changed our understanding of the situation. 30 years ago, before Jack was born, Sandra had a daughter named Sarah. The baby was born with a severe genetic condition and only lived for 4 months. After Sarah's death, doctors told Sandra that she might not be able to have more children due to complications from that pregnancy. According to Emma, Sandra fell into a deep depression and became obsessed with having another baby. When she finally got pregnant with Jack 3 years later, it was considered a miracle by the family. Emma explained that Sandra was extremely protective of Jack growing up, barely letting him out of her sight. She had also never properly grieved Sarah's death or gotten any help to process her trauma. The family never spoke about Sarah, and any photos or mementos of her were locked away in the attic. Emma only knew about this because her mother, Sandra's sister, had told her recently, worried about Sandra's increasingly erratic behavior towards me. Emma's mother had tried to convince Sandra to talk to a grief counselor many times over the years, but Sandra always refused, saying she was fine. This revelation explains so much about Sandra's obsession with grandchildren. She sees my inability to have children as history repeating itself, and it's triggering all her unresolved trauma from losing Sarah. In her mind, she's not just losing potential grandchildren, she's reliving the loss of her daughter. When Jack heard about Sarah, he was completely shocked. He had no idea he had a sister, and he was hurt that his parents had kept this from him his entire life. He spent hours going through old family photos, looking for any sign of Sarah's existence, but Sandra had been thorough in erasing all traces of that period of her life. We decided to approach Sandra with this new understanding, hoping it might lead to a breakthrough. Jack invited his parents over to our house, thinking a neutral setting might help. When we gently brought up Sarah, Sandra's reaction was explosive. She turned pale, then started screaming at Emma's mother, who wasn't even present, for betraying her confidence. She accused us of using her dead daughter to manipulate her and said we had no right to bring up Sarah. Then she revealed something that showed just how far she had gone in her campaign against our marriage. She had already put a down payment on a 1-bedroom apartment near her house, convinced that Jack would leave me soon. She had furnished it with some of Jack's old furniture from their attic and had even started telling her friends that Jack and I were already separated and living apart. She had created an entire fantasy where Jack would leave me, move into this apartment, and then quickly find someone else to marry and have children with. She had even started looking into fertility specialists in the area for Jack's future wife. Tom, who had been quiet during most of this conversation, finally spoke up. He admitted that Sandra had withdrawn a significant amount from their retirement savings to pay for the apartment and furniture, all without discussing it with him. He seemed more concerned about the financial aspect than his wife's deteriorating mental state. When Jack tried to make his father understand how serious the situation was, Tom just shrugged and said we needed to be patient with Sandra because losing a child changes a person. He completely dismissed how Sandra's behavior was affecting us and suggested we should just give in to what she wants to keep the peace. The most disturbing part was when Sandra pulled out a photo album she had created. It contained pictures of Jack with Amy from college, but she had digitally edited some of them to show a pregnant Amy. She had actually created a fake timeline of what Jack's life should have been if he hadn't met me. This level of delusion and obsession has really scared us. We're now seriously considering getting a restraining order, especially after discovering that Sandra has been driving by our house regularly and taking photos of who comes and goes. She's created a serious situation that we can't ignore anymore, no matter how much we understand the trauma that led to her behavior. Update 3: After everything that happened, Jack and I have made some major decisions about our future. We've decided to move to Boston where Jack's company has another office. He requested a transfer last week, and it was approved yesterday. The best part is that it comes with a promotion, so at least something good has come out of this mess. We haven't told anyone in his family about the move yet. We're planning to leave quietly next month because we know Sandra will try to sabotage our plans if she finds out. We've already found an apartment and started secretly moving our important documents and valuable items to a storage unit. Before making this decision, we tried one last time to reconcile with his parents. We invited them to dinner at a nice restaurant, thinking a public place might help keep things civil. I spent hours rehearsing what I wanted to say, hoping to find the right words to reach Sandra. The dinner started okay. We suggested family counseling, offering to pay for it ourselves. We even brought up the possibility of adoption in the future, thinking it might help Sandra see that there were other ways to have grandchildren. That turned out to be a huge mistake. Sandra's reaction to the adoption suggestion was heartbreaking. She said she would never accept an adopted child as her real grandchild. She went on a long rant about how adopted children are damaged and how they never truly become part of the family. When Jack reminded her that one of her closest friends had adopted 2 children, she said that was different because they couldn't afford fertility treatments, while we were choosing not to have real children. Tom sat there nodding along with everything Sandra said. When Jack finally confronted him about his passive behavior, Tom told him that he was making the biggest mistake of his life by choosing me over his family. He said that one day Jack would wake up as a 45-year-old man with no children and realize he had wasted his life with me. The final straw came when Sandra revealed that she had joined some online grandparents' rights groups and was looking into whether she could legally force us to let her be part of any future adopted child's life. She had convinced herself that we were secretly planning to adopt without telling her. Jack finally snapped. He told his parents that they had left us with no choice but to distance ourselves from them. He listed everything Sandra had done: the lies about me, the apartment, the edited photos, the workplace incident, the stalking, and said he couldn't trust them anymore. We're moving next month. Jack has already blocked his parents' numbers and social media accounts. We've installed security cameras at our current house just in case Sandra tries anything before we leave. We've also warned our new landlord in Boston not to give out any information about us to anyone. The hardest part has been watching Jack grieve the loss of the parents he thought he had. He keeps saying he never realized how conditional their love was until now. Yesterday, he found some old family photos and just sat there staring at them for hours. Emma has promised to keep us updated if Sandra's behavior escalates further. She told us that Sandra has already started telling people that I forced Jack to move away, and that I'm isolating him from his family just like she predicted. At this point, we don't even care what she says anymore. Sometimes the only way to deal with toxic family members is to remove yourself from the situation entirely. It hurts, and it's not what we wanted, but we need to focus on our future and our happiness. If anything good has come from this, it's that Jack and I are stronger than ever. We've seen the worst of what people can do to us, and we've faced it together. Maybe someday, if Sandra gets professional help and shows real change, we might reconsider our relationship with her. But for now, this distance is necessary for our mental peace and our marriage. This is probably my last update. Thank you to everyone who has supported us through this journey. Sometimes the family you choose is better than the family you're born into.